Alright, grade 11s, we're starting with solids, and I'm going to use page 65 as the one to help us get back into this. We did this in grade 10, so hopefully it'll come back to you very quickly. Alright, I'm not going to go and explain how to set up the question. Alright, you guys need to figure that out, how to draw squares and pentagons and hexagons and things. But just to give you a bit of an idea here is that the square prism that we're dealing with on page 65 on the left, it's tilted at 30 degrees, but remember square is at 45 here, so you can go and put your set squares together like that. Okay, so remember you can put your set squares together to help you solve some of these questions. Alright, now let's go over some basics. We have the auxiliary view. Okay, so this square shape over here just reminds us that this is a square. Alright, and then we have the XY line over here, and then this is the front view. Okay, then we need to number the square. Remember, you always have to have the shape and you have to number it. I know they've given you a 0 here, but let's ignore that. I'm going to start, remember, number 1, first one to the right, and then clockwise around. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4. We then use simple projection to project the front view, and then you can see that, look, 4 has to be here and here in line with 4. 1 and 3 are on the same line, 2 in the same line. Now, remember, with a prism, you have the same shape, or in this case, a square on the top and on the bottom. The same number will be at the top and on that same line at the bottom. So I've written them in blue here at the top and green at the bottom. All right. There's also then a section line called AA, which we'll deal with just now. Now, the first thing is, before we get to the sectioning of the solid, is to draw the solid without it being sectioned. But remember, don't draw it too dark, otherwise you're going to have to erase things. Some basic information about prisms. Remember that if you've got a square on the top and the bottom, when that prism tilts, remember that the square, or whatever shape it is, will simply compress and get smaller and smaller the more you tilt that object. The other thing, remember from grade 10, is that whatever size or like compressed shape, so in other words a diamond in this case, you get at the top, it'll be exactly the same at the bottom. Except remember that one of the shapes, in this case the top one, the blue numbers, will be a solid shape, whereas the bottom one, although it's the same size shape, will have the hidden detail. Okay, now I've gone ahead and put some lines in here, but you can see it's simple projection methods. I've gone and taken the numbers, and I've taken projection lines vertically downwards. This is for my top view. Okay, numbers are very important. So in other words, these numbers 1, 2, 4 can only exist in that vertical plane. And the same with the green ones here at the base. They can only exist in that vertical plane. Now remember, in EGD you always need to get information from 2 different views to get your third answer view. Okay, so we've taken information from the front view. We need to get information from another view. And where will that come from? From the auxiliary view. Okay, so here's another simple rule to remember from grade 10. We get these distances by taking our compass, putting the compass point on the XY line. Remember, it must be XY line and then on the number. And then we take that distance, we look for the same number, so in this case number 1. Remember, the compass has to go on the XY line. And then we mark it off like that, and this is where number 1 would be. Let's quickly run through the rest of these. To get number 2, compass point on XY line, follow 2, compass point on XY line. Mark it off. That's 2. 3 is a very small distance here, but compass on XY line, follow it down, compass point on XY line. That's 3. And finally 4, which is the same distance as 2, but let's just do it anyways. XY line, compass, follow 4, put the compass on the XY line, and mark off where 4 would be. Now, you could go and do this exact same concept for the bottom, but because this prism is lying in like one plane, I can actually just project the line, the numbers across horizontally, and then follow the bases numbers 1 to 4 down. So see, 4 comes down, 4 is across, so that must be number 4 over there. Let's just go from 1 to 3. Okay, 1 is here, 1 comes down, 1. 2 comes down, 2. 3 comes down, 3. Okay, so you can see that 3 has to be in the same line, 2's in the same line, 4's in the same line, 1's in the same line. Now remember from grade 10, it's safe to go and fill in the solid base, the base that you would see. So if I'm looking at the top down, it's the blue numbers that I would see. But don't draw it too dark, because like I said, we're going to go and cut this thing. If I'm drawing it dark here, it's just for the sake of being able to see it in the video. Okay, the outside of that shape would always be solid, so let me just put some solid lines in here. Okay, 4 to 4 would be solid because it's on the top. And then we don't necessarily have to put hidden detail in these, but just for the sake of explanation, let's just put this in here, this hidden detail line. Okay, so this is what we learned in grade 10. Remember, we have a tilted prism. You're going to have one shape which is solid, and the lowest shape is identical in size but has the hidden detail line. Okay, but now we need to cut this. So we go and we look at the section line AA. And what we do is, wherever, starting from left to right, wherever the section line AA cuts through a numbered line, we give it a letter. So we're going to start from left to right, A, then it cuts through here, 1, 3 becomes B, and then it cuts through the base there, C. So we have got 3 letters. Now, it is very, very simple, and this is where the letters and numbers help us in these questions. Wherever that letter gets projected directly downwards and cuts through its numbered line, that is where it's going to be. So A is on line 4, 4. A simply has to drop straight down. And where it cuts through line 4, 4, that's where A would be. B is on 1 and 3. So I drop B straight down. And where it cuts through line 1 and 3, you would have B. C is on the base, okay? So it cuts through between 1 and 2 and 2 and 3. So there are 2 C's again, here and here. All right. Now, something to remember from grade 10 that I've taught you is that once you have the letters, it is safe to go and join all the letters with a solid line. I'm going to do this in red so you can see it clearly. Okay, so there's the shape of the cut surface. If you took the square prism and cut it at AA, that is the shape that you would be left with. What I want to simply do now is, work out, well, what is left, okay? Because there's some other lines that have to be solid and some have to be ignored. So think of it this way. You're always removing the part which is in the way of the AA line. So I'm taking this top corner piece off, all right? That means that from A to 4, I'm not going to necessarily go in order from 1 to 4, so I'm just going to do whatever I see here first. From A to 4 is definitely still there. So from A to 4 still exists. The entire base, the whole green base here, the lower one, still exists. So I'm going to make sure that I can see that. Right, now some of these questions say that they don't need hidden detail, but I'm just going to put it in here. So there's the base. From B to 1 and 3, the green 1 and 3, the base one, is still there. So I would still have to make sure that those lines are visible. So that's from B to 3 and B to 1. The rest of this top base, the blue lines, from C to 2, it still exists. So from C to 2, I need to draw that in. All right. The rest of from the A, B, and C to the blue lines or the top base have disappeared. So these little corners here, they've gone. The rest of that base over there, it's gone. All right. So let me just draw this in now so that we can see it. All right. If we were doing hidden detail, line 2 to 2 still does exist. So we could go and put this hidden detail line in over here. Okay. So there's the shape after it has been cut with hidden detail. And all that's missing now is the hatching. Now, obviously, you would use your 45-degree set square. For the sake of time, I'm just going to freehand this in here with the green Koki. But there's the top view. And then if we look at the question again and think about it, if I had cut the square prism on AA, so we had A, B, C, took it away, you'd be left with that shape. And that's what's left of this prism. Okay, now for the sake of time, I'd like you to try the side view as well, which will give you a very similar type of answer to this.